Okay, folks, so welcome everybody to 52 Living Ideas. Today, I'm doing a full-fledged workshop. I call it the 10-minute Yoda-Brainstorm Cycle. Okay, the aim is to see how much thinking you can do within 5 minutes. There are going to be these two periods of 5 minutes. And I just want to demonstrate how much thinking, this is something that you can demonstrate to yourself of how much thinking you can do in 5 minutes. Okay, that's the purpose of this. Now, the credit for this, I originally learned this from organization called CFAR. They have got a manual and they call it the resolve cycle. But this is a kind of simplified version of it, modified version of it. But I want to give credit for the original idea coming from them. But I've modified it. And this is, I think, my fourth or fifth presentation of it. I've done it 3 times in my New York group, in-person group. And this is the second time I'm doing it on Zoom. All right. So let me dive into it. What is this method? It's very simple. It's 3 steps. Okay. First, you aim at a tough problem. So you have to think of a problem which is very tough. Or you can think of a question that you would like to answer. You yourself would like to answer. Don't take a hypothetical question. Don't take a hypothetical problem. Take an actual problem that you want to solve. Take an actual question that you would like to answer. Okay, that's the first step. The second step, we are going to actually take 5 minutes to try to solve the problem. Try to answer the question. Okay, actually try to answer it. Okay. And then we have a third step of brainstorm. Okay, so that's the overall pattern that we are going to go through. So let's begin. The first step is to select a tough problem to solve or tough question to answer. So take a minute, think of tough, don't be shy, don't be, be ambitious here. Okay, choose a very tough problem which you think you can't possibly solve, or choose a tough question that you really have and would really like to answer. Okay, so once you can think of a question, once you have thought of a question, go ahead and type yes in the chat. Okay, this is highly participatory. I strongly recommend that you go ahead and actually, do these exercises. You will need a pen and a paper. Once you have a answer, once you have chosen a problem, a tough problem or a tough question, just go ahead and type yes. I'm going to give another minute or so. I want to make sure that everybody has chosen a problem to work on. All right. Very good. All right. I hope everybody has chosen a problem. I'm going to give another maybe 10 seconds, 15 seconds. If you have not chosen the problem, I'm going to describe what we're going to do next. Use that time to choose the problem. Okay. All right. So now I'm going to describe you the first step. The first step was choosing a problem. Now this is the second step. Okay. The second step I call the Yoda cycle. This comes from Star Wars. Yoda says there is no try. You either do or don't do. That is what it is. So what we are going to do is I'm going to set a 5-minute timer. Okay. All right. I hope everybody is ready. And during this 5-minute, you're going to actually try to solve the problem. and actually try to answer the question that you have posed for yourself, okay? You're not just going to plan, you're going to try to completely solve it. Try your best to completely solve it, okay? All right. So I'm starting the timer now. So take this 5 minutes to actually try to solve this problem. Starting the 5 minutes now. All right, folks. So that was the exercise. What we're going to do next is we're going to go directly into the breakout rooms and in a small group discuss what was your experience trying to solve a tough problem in 5 minutes. Talk to each other. Please start by giving everyone a chance to answer that question for 1 to 2 minutes. It's going to be a very short breakout rooms, just about 15 minutes. So each person will just get to speak their mind, hear what other people are saying, and then we will come back for the second part. Okay, so I'm starting the breakout rooms now. So the question is, what was the experience? What was your experience doing this? Welcome back. So now we're going to go to the next step. That's the third step, which is the brainstorm cycle. But before that, type in the chat just yes or no. Do you think you solved the problem? Were you able to answer the question? Yes or no? Yes, or you can say yes, no, or maybe. Okay, so we got some yeses, some no's, very good, no's, maybe. Okay, 80% yes, yes, maybe. Okay, all right. So this is the next step. All right, so now we're going to go to the next step, which is called the brainstorm cycle. So suppose your answer was yes or no. Suppose your answer was yes, assume that the answer that you had did not actually work, that that problem was not actually solved. Assume that, okay? If your answer was no or maybe, then you are in the same situation. So now what we are going to do is that we are going to say that our first attempt did not work. And what we are going to do now is we are going to think of as many different ways of solving the problem, alternative methods of solving the problem, alternative ways of answering the question as we can think of. We're focused on the same question. If we have thought that we have an answer, we assume that we were wrong and we are looking for alternatives. If we think we have not solved the problem, then we are saying, okay, what are the various ways in which we could possibly solve the problem? Here we are not actually trying to solve the problem, but try to map out as many different ways of solving the problem or answering the question as we can. Don't be afraid to include wild and improbable ideas here. So let me read through this again. So we're going to set a 5-minute timer. I'm going to set the timer for you again. Regardless of whether you think you solved the problem or not, assume that your first attempt failed and brainstorm as many alternate solutions as you can in the next 5 minutes. You're not actually trying to solve the problem in this cycle, but trying to brainstorm as many ways of solving the problem as you possibly can. Don't be afraid to include wild and implausible ways. Okay, I'm starting the 5-minute timer now. Go ahead and try to brainstorm as many different ways of solving the problem as you can. Starting the timer now. All right, so we've just finished the brainstorm. Now what we're going to do is that we're going to jump directly into the breakout rooms and talk about, did the 5-minute brainstorming produce some results for you, produce useful results for you? Again, give everybody 1 to 2 minutes to talk about their own answer to this question, what was the brainstorm like, and then we will come back for going further, to go the next step. Okay, so I'm going to start the breakout rooms now. Right, welcome back, folks. Welcome back. So now what we're going to do is I've got 2 questions for you. So first, we're going to ask one question. I'm going to ask the question, and I invite everybody to answer it. But if you want to answer it, you can go ahead and type exclamation mark, and we'll go by that order. Then we're going to do one more exercise for 5 minutes to show you the versatility of this tool. And then we're going to ask a second question. And then we're going to close the meetup. Okay, so the question is, what are your takeaways from trying out this 10-minute Yoda-Brainstorm cycle? If you'd like to answer the question, go ahead and type exclamation mark in chat. What are your takeaways? Give me a second here. Okay, so we're going to start with Cotton, followed by Linda. Folks, I invite you to go ahead and do this. Give me just a second here. I want to get this going. Hold on. Okay, all right. Now, so it's going to be Cotton, Linda, Kevin, Joe, Marco, and Brian. Cotton, go ahead.
Yeah, I think this is excellent. I was telling my breakout that I tend to be like a problem solver, and I spend all night thinking about trying to solve all these problems. But I think that was then it kind of leads to anxiety. So doing this in a kind of focused 5-minute segment, the first time, step 2, idea just flowed, just flowed. I couldn't believe it. The third brainstorming, I thought I was a little too confident that I had found a good solution. So the first few minutes or seconds, I was like, I had a little block, but then things came. So then I was talking to some of my uh, breakout mates, and I think maybe I should not be that confident that I found a good solution. So keep it open. So excellent. Thank you.
Thank you, Cotton. Next up is going to be Linda, Kevin, and Joe. Linda, go ahead.
I thought this was excellent, especially the second 5 minutes. I came up with a solution that was better than anything I would have thought of the first 5 minutes. But what I would suggest is have the same breakout groups, because then we don't have to spend as much time explaining to new people what we were doing. I like this very much.
Wonderful. Thank you, Linda. Next up is Kevin, Joe, and Marco. Kevin, go ahead.
Thank you, Frank. That's my second time play the game. So I already kind of set my topic, but still excited. It's still like 100-meter race, and a breakout room is useful too. I presented them 2 times. It's helped me. The organizer me thought even very abstractive. I'm going to revise. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Next up is Joe, Marco, and Brian. Folks, if you want to share your takeaways, what you got from this, go ahead and type exclamation mark. Joe, go ahead.
So really quickly, the first time around that was mostly just solving the problem, right? And I came up with a solution, but I felt like, I was just putting out fires initially. But the second time, when I had to come up with counter solutions, I was figuring out why the problem existed in the first place.
Wow.
So that was what I started to say, okay, there's a bigger issue here. So then once you do that, you can kind of get to the root cause when you come up with just thinking about the alternatives. And you may end up solving a bigger problem than you actually initially intended to. So I think that it allows you to get to a root cause, is the second 5 minutes provided for me.
Excellent. That was fantastic. Thank you, Joe. Next up is Marco, Brian, and Betty. Marco, go ahead.
Yeah, the second round was definitely, I definitely like honed in more on the problem, like on the second round. and I also got more into the particulars, and it kind of helped like to expand my even the far out the far out solutions, like, were kind of like opened up my mind a little bit to more solutions. And yeah, I thought it was really helpful.
Wonderful. Thank you, Marco. Next up is Brian, Betty, and Alex. Brian, go ahead.
Okay, yes, very useful technique. However, I found that having the right type of question, if I can put it that way, helps an awful lot, because the question I used was one which I've been thinking about a long time. I already have 3 answers fixed in my head, and guess what? Those were the 3 answers that came up in the brainstorming. I've done it before, but with large groups to try and get to problems. And I would, just one point, I would disagree with Linda. I think it's much better to have different groupings all the way through. You get a wider range of viewpoints.
Okay, thank you, Brian. Next up is Betty, Alex, and Jeff. Betty, go ahead.
Okay, yeah, I just found it an interesting process to ask questions and to let go and let the answers come through. I didn't have solutions to my problem, but I really like the idea of priming the mind, asking questions, and then letting go, and then letting the answers filter through.
That's wonderful. I really like that term. That's very nice. Excellent. Next up is going to be Alex, Jeff, and Elle. Alex.
I found this super useful, and I think specifically when you said in the third section to allow for the implausible, and what that allowed my mind to do is kind of focus on more unique, creative, and absurd possibilities. And I found something that I'm actually going to add to the original focus that makes it more unique, interesting, and I think more useful, honestly.
Excellent. Thank you, Alex. Next up is Jeff, Elle, and Stacy. Jeff, go ahead.
So, Shrikant, the problem that I put forth is actually a problem that I'm just annoyed it even exists. So I'm pissed off at the problem to begin with, and it's complex enough that I was not able to come up with a solution in the first 5 minutes. Although just asking myself questions about it did begin to reveal some of the factors that I might consider in coming up with solutions. So then in the second 5 minutes, I did begin to brainstorm solutions, but I still hate all of these possible solutions. And in the second round of conversation, and talking it over with Joe did something that then spurred potentially a really important thing for me, which is, given how everything is thrown up in the air, I'm wondering if there's some possible way to restructure the whole thing so that the solution could be way better than the status quo. In other words, is there any way to do this to sort of not waste a crisis and make the actual idea for the solution be better than just solving the problem? And that was both hopeful and I felt better about it, even though I didn't actually have a solution, but it gave me something I'm excited about doing rather than just being pissed off.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jeff. That was great observations. Thank you. Next up is Elle, followed by Stacy. Elle, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I thought it was a very useful exercise. The brainstorming, I was able to see the problem and the solution in different ways. And just very simply, I think I used a personal problem, but and I was thinking that, I was held up because I couldn't plan a solution, but I think I saw ways around that, and I did get something out of it. And
Wonderful.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
Right. Stacy.
Yeah, so the couple of interesting things for me, I think the hard part for me was thinking of a problem that and most of the things I came up with, in that short amount of time, is just coming up with technical problems, right? And I know how to approach those. And spending 5 minutes on them, that would have been interesting. The hypothetical problem that I came up with was getting a frisbee off a rooftop, because to me it's the kind of problem where you can take action, and that's that first 5 minutes is actually doing something and not just thinking about something, but doing something. And so you get a frisbee off a rooftop, you can go and grab a rake, you can try to pull it down with a rope, you can throw another frisbee at it, like you can do all these things for 5 minutes. And if those don't work, you sit back and you think, okay, what didn't work, what got me close? And you can start to brainstorm some ideas how to get the frisbee off the roof. That's why I put the silly comment about drones for getting frisbees off the roof. But there are other types of problems where I was finding myself going in immediately into brainstorming, immediately into thinking about, okay, what kinds of ways can I solve this? And that was more like 10 minutes of brainstorming instead of 5 minutes of action, followed by 5 minutes of brainstorming. So that's my struggle, is how to do that, because I'm so used to brainstorming. I have some great brainstorming exercises that we do, like design thinking and some of those. I'm so used to doing that first. It was hard for me to characterize what it is to take action for 5 minutes on some of those problems. So that's the big struggle for me, is how to do that. How to, certain things just seem more intellectual and not active.
Wonderful. Thank you, Stacy. Great observations. Next up is Becky. Becky, go ahead.
So my initial solution, I was pretty confident in, but it was also my default way of approaching solutions, very systematic. I laid down 1, 2, 3, and it started to flow very naturally. And once that was taken away from me, that was no longer an option. I had to become extremely creative and think outside the box. And it turns out that my obvious solution to me and my default preference was not the optimal one. And once at every step, I started generating these ideas, some crazy, but some very good. And at each of the steps, I found ways to either keep that current step or a better way. So I was able to overall optimize my approach.
Wonderful. Thank you, Becky. Now what I'm going to do is that I'm going to summarize what everybody said, and then I have one comment about this method, one observation about this method, and what makes it a little bit unusual than most other methods. Cotton talked about that the ideas just flowed once some block was removed. Linda pointed out that the second 5 minutes were far more productive for her. Kevin talked about this as being a 100-meter race. Joe had fantastic observations about that. The first part was the Yoda cycle was about just putting out fires. But when he moved to the Brainstorm cycle, he asked questions like, why did the problem exist in first place? And ended up looking at root causes of the problem. Marco also found the second round particularly useful, and found that he was considering far out solutions that he had not that he would normally not consider. Brian pointed out that it's important to have the right type of question. If you take a question that you have already answered and are comfortable with, it's not going to produce that good results. Betty talked about a very interesting observation about how this primes the mind, just putting the question down in a very clear way, and then letting your mind just letting it go and letting it flow and produce things. Alex thought that the point in the second exercise of allowing for the implausible was a particular value, because it really frees up your imagination and kind of seeing of possibilities. Jeff had really fantastic observation about taking up a very hard problem, and in the first cycle getting very frustrated about it. In the Brainstorm cycle, starting to see some possible solutions. And then when he actually moved to using Brainstorm with his group, with Joe and other people in the group, he found a way that maybe it was possible to restructure the problem itself, and whatever solution that could be produced could be better than solution that he would have hoped for the problem, and solve maybe other problems too. Elle talked about, saw, that there is a way of kind of that she was stuck, and this provided kind of ways around, multiple ways around. Stacy talked about that the fact that he's very used to brainstorming, but the idea of putting the action point first was very novel, and incorporating that, especially first, was very interesting. Becky talked about that in the first go, she focused on the default way of operating. And once that was taken away from her, then all kinds of new possibilities arose, which would not have otherwise occurred to her. So the observation I want to make here is in terms of Daniel Kahneman's ideas about system 1 and system 2. In the first one, so first thing is that both your systems work very well when you set a definite purpose. So having that, saying, okay, this is the problem I'm going to solve. Putting the limit, time limit, really concentrates both your system 1 and system 2. So having a clear goal and a time limit, this combination is really powerful for both the systems. Now, what the way in which the sequence works is that in the first cycle, you're using your system 1. As Becky said, you're using the default part. You're using what naturally comes to you. And, and it is focused on actually trying to solve the problem. Many times you've kind of hummed and hawed and not really attacked the problem. This is, you're just attacking the problem with your system 1 and trying to kind of get it done. This is, the way in which Joe described it, it's kind of putting out fires with whatever resources. Stacy described it as kind of, getting the frisbee off. That's what you're doing in the first step. In the second step, what you're saying is that you're deliberately saying that whatever your system 1 came up with was useless. This is a way of actually applying kind of Bayes' rule, kind of applying the fact that you may be wrong, okay, and making that a standard part of your toolkit. Say, okay, I thought that this was the best solution, but I was wrong. Now what? And what that does, it opens up possibilities that would be covered up because your system 1 thought that the problem was arrived. So it's a way of engaging, kind of stopping your system 1 for getting locked onto a solution so you can look for other possibilities. Okay, so that's what I think. So now I'm going to go to the next step, which is going to be an exercise. This is a 5-minute exercise to just show you the power of this method. Okay, what we're going to do is, again, we're going to take 5 minutes, and now try to think of it. I'll phrase it in 2 possible ways. Okay, and you can choose whichever one appeals to you. The first is, as I've stated it, can you list kind of 10 tough problems or questions that you would like to try this technique on? Okay. Obviously, many of you found this technique useful. What you need is that we just used the first version of it, kind of in terms of choosing the problem. We use the first method. We let our system 1 choose a problem for us. Now, this is a way of actually brainstorming the possible problems or questions we can come up with. Another way of thinking about this, which is also a very powerful way, is think of it in terms of a bug list. Look at your life as a whole and say, what are the bugs in it? Okay, and make a list of the bugs. Anything that is wrong in any field, just make a list of those things, okay? As possible things you could apply this method to, okay? So you can think of it in terms of coming up with a bug list in your life, or you can think of it in terms of 10 tough problems or questions that you can try this method on, okay? So ignore the second part of the question. Let's just focus on that first part, coming up with a list of things. So I'm starting the timer again for 5 minutes, and let's spend 5 minutes trying to come up with as many problems. If you come up with more than 5, that's fine, or more than 10, that's fine too. Just put down many problems that you would like to use this technique on. I've started the timer. You got 5 minutes. All right. So now that you've had both kind of, you talked about your experience of using this. Now I want to actually have you try this during this week. So I want your ideas about how do you think you can use it in your life? How can you use it? So you now have like a list of bugs, list of problems and questions. You have a method, you've kind of, you've tried it, you've talked to other people about it, you have an idea of what it is. So how will you use it? So that's the question. So how will you use this method? Let's talk about it for the next week. Any ideas about how you will use it? So if you would like to share how you plan to use it, just go ahead and type exclamation mark. All right, anybody? So we'll start with Linda. Linda, how are you planning to use this method?
I found a problem with it. As long as I stayed with problems that were exterior to me, it was great. But when I started to try to use it with my bug list, my personal issues, it fell apart. It was my personal issues were just too upsetting. I don't know how to get around that part of it.
Got it. I mean, the good thing about this is that you can try it for 5 minutes, even if it is upsetting. It is worth, because the other aspect of this method is that by putting 5-minute limit, you can say, yes, this is kind of hard for me, but let me see if I can do it for 5 minutes. And that's probably, kind of doing it multiple ways. The other point I want to make for kind of use of this method is that this method is very powerful in its recursive form. If you bring the same thing to bear on the same problem. So that's why I had the other question. Like if you have a particularly difficult problem, which you've been working on all your life or for years, maybe you can't solve it in 10 minutes completely. But the good thing is that you make progress in these 10 minutes using this method. And what you do is that you can come back to it. This is the idea of kind of spurts. And then you can work on it like maybe once a day or something like that. Then let your mind remain fallow as it makes more connections, come back to it in a different context, something like that. So recursively, it works very well. Next up is Joe. Joe, how are you planning to use it?
I mean, I think it could be used to become our ideal self. I mean, the way we used it actually was outwitting the devil. And specifically, when you make a list of all those things that how you perceive yourself, then you start to make a 5-10 minute list of, and it starts to get you the action plans and the questions that you need to start asking yourself. And so that was one area, but there was another area at work. There would be a problem that I could just start reimagining from like I call it zero-based budget approach. There's that's a whole approach. But anyway, and I thought that would be very, very helpful in just saying, okay, how would I do this task if there were no constraints? And then I could start asking a lot more questions about how we acquire certain things at work, specifically. And I had a whole list of other issues that I could apply it to within my personal life. Excellent. Specifically when it comes to like exercise. I don't even want to say public speaking.
Okay.
Okay. So, all right, then I'll leave it at that.
Wonderful. Thank you, Joe. Folks, if you want to talk about how do you plan to use it, go ahead and type exclamation mark. L, how are you planning to use this method? L followed by Brian, followed by Cotton.
Oh, do you know what I did, everybody, was I wrote down font. Oh, okay. How am I planning to use it? I'm planning to try and solve that non-institutional personal problem of getting the exercise and getting my strength. And I like these institutional approaches, though. And I think for getting people to use public transportation, I would love to be able to
Sure. You
work
can
on
pick
that.
whatever problems you want. So let's see. So what we do is
Thanks.
go ahead and apply all these things, and then what we can do is we can come back a week from today on Monday, and people can talk about what they got, what kind of progress that they are able to make. Next up is going to be Brian, Cotton, and Kevin. Brian.
Okay. First of all, what I did was I did a bug list and I came up with 12 items fairly easily. I then categorized those into health and wellness, and I came up with 12 areas there. From those 10, they came to 12. I then started to do a list of what I could do more. But all this, I mean, as you can well imagine, I've done this before several times, not this technique, but sort of looked at the issues and the things I need to address. And in reality, I don't think I take any one of these. I don't need to problem solve it. What I need to do is, I know the problem. What I need to do is get the energy, effort, commitment to do something about it. That's really the issue I have.
Wonderful. Thank you, Brian. Next up is Cotton, Kevin, and Lou.
So yes, the first couple of minutes, I came up with top 10 pretty easily because they were like my top 10 to do, always procrastinate. And then you said 2 more minutes or something. And then so I came up with another 12. So these are the things that I have, all these things I want to do, wish list or must do list. That's overwhelming. But now with this new approach, 5 minute, I'm going to tackle it. I'm going to give it 5 minutes, and that makes it much more manageable. So I'm going to give it a shot.
Wonderful. Thank you, Cotton. Next up is Kevin.
I say first point, I'm a very kind of temper person. Just give me, let's say, normally take a 3-second deep breath. Why give me myself or another opponent or party? Both have 5 minutes. Let's come back. Kind of something come new. Maybe kind of reach something come happy end. Make a win-win situation. That's first. For my own project, I would say I don't know why. When I'm myself, I sit down, less productivity. When you join the meeting like group, like energies come from everybody else. Then I feel very productivity, very creativity also come up.
Wonderful. Thank you, Kevin. Lou, I'm going to try to answer your question. I can do it in text way. Let me try that. Okay, so Lou says, I feel that this method assumes all logic thinking slash steps, which is expected as it asks us to focus on thinking or reasoning. But sometimes our problems involve emotions, and tough problems may involve strong emotions, especially if they are personal. The emotions may interfere and make the method not as effective as it can be, but I might be very wrong here. One of the things I actually like about this method is that it actually is a very effective way of dealing with emotions, because many times what happens is that these are the problems that we've been dealing with for a long time and evading them, really, not really looking at them. And by putting a 5-minute limit, it actually makes it easy to jump in and face things which otherwise you would not have faced. Also kind of asking yourself, saying, okay, what's the biggest problem that I can solve? Or what are the problems in my life? I think, and making a list and then kind of solving it in, I like one phrase of kind of, thinking in little glances. So when you're kind of trying to do a kind of a quick sprint through something, many times it is easier than just kind of stewing in a problem emotionally. So in many ways, many aspects of this method kind of breaks the flow of negative emotions by doing all kinds of limiting, especially having the separating kind of the action step from the brainstorm step. So in some ways, it is actually a very effective way of dealing with emotion. Not saying that this is the problem, this is a solution to everything, but I think it has some advantages of dealing with emotions. So it's not just purely a conceptual method. It actually is very effective in dealing with emotions as well. Mushki, would you like to make a comment? Let's see.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Yeah, just a short comment. Firstly, I love this. I discovered so much. So I'm along the theme of, okay, so how do we get the push to do it? One thing is intellectualizing it, like we just discussed. So I came up with an idea that instead of just saying like, okay, so how do I solve the problem? Why the resistance? Asking myself, why the resistance towards solving the problem? Why hasn't it been solved yet? Why the resistance? And two, what are the benefits of solving this problem? So how can I visualize the benefits? So I feel like getting to the root first before saying, let's say I have a problem, messy room. Okay, time increments, rewards, punishments. Okay, but why? Why is it like this? Because I know all these methods and I'm still not cleaning my room. So it's time for me to first figure out why the resistance and what are the benefits of cleaning. So those are my takeaways. So thank you so much. So I think I'm going to implement this.
Excellent. So, so the final step is, so I want to make just one last point that I discovered when I was doing kind of meetups on this. What I discovered is that doing this in a group has some added advantages, because what it is that many times the problems that we face, we've been sitting with them for a long time, and even when you're trying to explicitly brainstorm, the range of what you can think of is also limited, even when we are trying to be trying to include implausible things. And many times kind of doing brainstorm with other people can give you clues and kind of ideas, because other people don't have the same kind of constraints as you. So they can sometimes think of things which are unusual. So that I found that to be very interesting. So the assignment for this week is apply this to the same problem recursively, as I was saying, or to multiple problems in the list that you have now of the bug list or the questions list. And let's talk about the results next week. All right, folks. So happy thinking. And this was delightful. Thank you very much for all your observations. And we'll see you next time.